Well, Bill, the FBI raiding the home of former U.S. Ambassador John Bolton. We are awaiting more details. We are told Bolton is not under arrest. House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer is here. We got lots to talk about, including the Biden investigations that you're continuing. But before we do that, let me ask you your initial reaction to this news about Ambassador Bolton's home and I think office being raided by the FBI today.
Well, I appreciate Kash Patel's tweet that no one's above the law. I've always suspected that the deep state was involved in things that, one day hopefully they would be discovered and held accountable. I don't know what John Bolton did. Obviously, he deserves due process. But I do believe that Kash Patel and Pam Bondi and John Radcliffe and Tulsi Gabbard are serious about holding the deep state accountable for all the mistakes and all the abuses of power that we've witnessed from the deep state over the past decade. So I think today's a positive day. We'll see what Bolton had in his possession. It appears that they suspect he had somehow mishandled classified documents. I've also always believed that the deep state was closely aligned with a lot of the defense contractors and encouraged a lot of interventions in other countries that I don't think were in the best interest of the taxpayer. So all of this is coming to a head, and I'm glad that the Trump administration is in power, and I'm glad that these people are finally being, at the very least, investigated.
Does it give you any concern about the perception of the weaponization of lawfare?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what the liberal media is going to say. This was retribution, that this was weaponized government agencies. I think that's ridiculous because that's what we saw in the Biden administration with respect to President Trump and other conservatives. So I don't think this is retribution. I think this is accountability. We'll see if for no reason they raided his house just to embarrass John Bolton like the Democrats did to President Trump. At Mar-a-Lago, then I think that they should bear some criticism. But right now, I have confidence in Kash Patel, and I don't believe he would do anything without having ample evidence to move forward.
Okay. Now, I want to move on to the interview that you had yesterday with the former one of the spokespeople at the Biden White House. That's Ian Sams. And Controller, I'm just going to ask you to play one of the sound bites that we had here for the original intro. I don't have a number for it, but this is your reaction to it yesterday. They don't have it. I will read it. Basically, you said that it was the most informative transcribed interview / deposition that you've had, and that you will give Mr. Sams credit. He answered our questions. He communicated with Joe Biden 2 times. He saw Joe Biden, talk to Joe Biden 2 times the entire stint as he was serving as one of the spokespeople at the White House. Mm-hmm. I'm not entirely surprised by that, but I think it might be eye-opening to people to realize that you could have someone saying that Joe Biden was perfectly fine and how it was gratuitous and wrong for Robert Hur to put that in the report, but not to have any major interaction with him himself. Tell us more.
Well, I was surprised, and we had a list of things that we were going to ask Ian Sams. We never dreamed that he had no interaction with President Biden. I mean, this was President Biden's main spokesperson for 2 years. Jean-Pierre was in title only. Ian Sams was the guy that would go up and attack me or the Oversight Committee whenever we would get new bank records that would show the Biden family was involved in an influence peddling scheme. Ian Sams was the one that would go on TV and attack Robert Hur for implying that Joe Biden was in mental decline. And what we found out yesterday was he never even hardly communicated with Joe Biden. In 2 years, he
Sir,
had
can I interrupt you and just play for
face-to-face
people some of the things that
Yes.
Ian Sams had said at the time? Watch this montage of Sams and his comments. Watch.
All right.
I dispute that the characterizations about his memory that were in the report are accurate because they're not. And I think the president spoke very clearly about how his mind was on other things.
I think also on this issue of the memory, it's been selectively chopped up and edited and sent around because of the confusing way that report was written.
When I deal with him, he's sharp, he's asking tough questions, and he's speaking, I think maybe most importantly, speaking passionately about what matters to him.
So the reason I wanted to play that last one in particular is because that was 5 days after the debate between Trump and Biden, which sealed Biden's fate and forced him out of the race. And Ian Sams says, when I deal with him, he's sharp, he's asking tough questions. And your reaction to that from yesterday.
That's symbolic of the entire Biden administration. No one was ever around Joe Biden. We've heard Pete Buttigieg make comments that he had limited access to Joe Biden. He was his all-star cabinet secretary. Look, the more that's coming out in our investigation of the inappropriate use of the auto pen, the worse it gets for Joe Biden. It's very clear that he was shielded from even his most senior staffers. And they were given, Ian Sams didn't know what he was talking about. He was given talking points. We are trying to find who wrote those talking points out because he did not communicate with Joe Biden. He testified yesterday that 2 years, any other president would communicate multiple times a day. They would have multiple interactions with their press secretary. Ian Sams met him 2 times. And you think about how many times President Trump or President Obama or President Bush would communicate daily with their press secretary. You would see pictures in the Oval Office where they were prepping them before they would go out. Ian Sams went out every day and implied to the American people that he was communicating with Joe Biden and Joe Biden was healthy. And he was not. And I think the American people are seeing through this investigation and some of the books that have come out that this administration was involved in a major cover-up.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. So in any White House and in the administration, you can have many spokespeople who never do have that daily interaction. But he, in these interviews that he did, was saying, in my interactions with him, he's very sharp, and that was just 5 days after that debate. So I think your line of questioning was very interesting, and the results interesting as well. More to come in September, of course, and we'll have you back. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.